On the 14th day of the war, a reporter asked Donald Trump when it would end. Trump paused, then answered with words that will likely define this conflict in the history books. Machi upini, when I feel it in my bones. Not when Iran surrenders, not when the Strait of Hormuz reopens, not when a ceasefire is signed or a diplomatic framework is agreed, when the President of the United States feels it. That statement is now the unofficial timeline for ending what may be the most consequential military conflict the global energy market has ever experienced. Today is day 15. The bones have not yet spoken, and 2,500 United States Marines are sailing toward the narrowest, most dangerous choke point on Earth. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has approved a request from U.S. Central Command for an element of an amphibious ready group and attached Marine Expeditionary Unit. The deployment includes elements of the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit and the amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli, LHA-7, with the force potentially including roughly 2,500 Marines along with additional sailors. The full formation consists of the USS Tripoli and two other vessels, USS San Diego and USS New Orleans, with Navy personnel in an amphibious ready group typically numbering around 2,000, bringing the combined total to approximately 4,200 to 4,400 additional deployers. Marine Expeditionary Units serve as the Marine Corps' primary crisis response force. Each MEU typically includes an infantry battalion, an aviation element with helicopters and tiltrotor aircraft, and a logistics component capable of sustaining operations ashore. On deck are helicopter, gunships, F-35B fighter jets, MV-22 Osprey tiltrotor aircraft, CH-53 heavy-lift helicopters, armed infantry, special operations teams, armored vehicles, and landing craft designed to place troops onto a hostile shoreline. A U.S. official stated that U.S. Central Command asked for this new force in order to have more options for military operations against Iran, and that the Marine Expeditionary Unit will be able to conduct ground operations if ordered. This is not a symbolic deployment. This is preparation. To understand why sending Marines is such a significant escalation, you need to understand what their deployment actually signals. You do not send a Marine Expeditionary Unit to a region where the air campaign has already achieved its objectives. You send Marines when the air campaign has failed to accomplish something that must now be done physically. Hegseth declared at a Friday press conference that the U.S. was on plan to defeat, destroy, and disable all of their meaningful military capabilities at a pace the world has never seen, adding that Iran's air force was gone, its navy was at the bottom of the Persian Gulf, and its missile stockpile was shrinking daily. But the Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed. Shipping traffic has collapsed by 94%, and the Marines are still sailing. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirmed that before naval escorts for commercial ships could begin, the military was planning potential operations for taking out land-based anti-ship missiles that Iran has deployed in the Strait area. That sequence tells you everything. 2 weeks of intensive bombing, what the Pentagon has branded Operation Epic Fury, and the land-based missile threat is still significant enough that escort missions cannot yet begin. Iran designed its coastal defense network specifically to survive sustained air attack. Launchers are mobile, missiles are stored underground, crews disperse and relocate after each firing. Destroying a single launcher requires one strike, eliminating every launcher everywhere, so every crew is an entirely different challenge, and that challenge has not been solved from the air. At its narrowest point, the Strait of Hormuz is only 33 kilometers wide. On the northern side lies Iran, whose coastline stretches for hundreds of kilometers along the eastern Gulf, and much of that coastline is mountainous. Those mountains provide natural cover for missile batteries, radar installations, and underground storage facilities. Over decades, Iran constructed an entire defensive network along that coastline specifically designed to prevent foreign navies from controlling the strait. Military analysts call this an anti-access strategy. Instead of trying to defeat the U.S. Navy ship for ship, Iran focuses on making the environment so dangerous that ships simply cannot operate there safely. That strategy relies on 3 overlapping layers. First, sea mines. Relatively inexpensive but capable of shutting down shipping lanes instantly. Clearing them requires slow, careful operations using specialized minesweeping ships and helicopters, vessels that themselves become targets while doing that work. Hegseth dismissed reports that the strait had been mined, saying the U.S. had no clear evidence, and pointed to ships still transiting as proof it remained open. Iran has neither confirmed nor denied mine deployment. Second, drone boats and fast attack craft, small, fast, difficult to track because they blend into civilian maritime traffic until the moment they strike. Since February 28th, at least 16 oil tankers, cargo vessels, and other commercial ships have been attacked in the Persian, killing 8 seafarers with 1 still missing. Third, land-based anti-ship missiles positioned along the Iranian coast. Mobile, concealable, with ranges of hundreds of kilometers. When you combine mines, drone boats, and coastal missiles, you create a layered defensive zone that does not need to sink every ship to succeed. It only needs to make shipping companies believe the risk is too high. That calculation has already been made. The insurers left. The tankers stopped. The strait, functionally, is closed. The numbers are stark. According to Lloyd's List Intelligence, only 77 ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz in March 2026 so far. During the same period last year, 1,290 ships made the journey. That is a collapse of approximately 94%. More than 1,000 cargo vessels are currently anchored outside the strait, waiting. Iran has increased attacks on commercial shipping near the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea that carries roughly 20% of the world's oil supply and a significant share of global liquefied natural gas exports. Oil prices have fluctuated between $88 and $107 per barrel over the past 2 weeks. The U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve has released 400 million barrels to stabilize markets. But that is a temporary bridge, not a solution. The solution is reopening the strait, and the strait will not reopen because of press conferences. The disruptions have already shaken global energy markets, with every update from Washington, Tehran, or military commanders triggering immediate movement in commodity markets as traders attempt to calculate whether the conflict will escalate or stabilize. Here is where the strategic picture becomes most complicated for Washington. 2 Indian-flagged tankers carrying liquefied petroleum gas crossed the strait safely on Saturday morning. Iran's ambassador to India confirmed that Tehran had granted Indian vessels a rare exemption, the result of direct talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. A Turkish-owned vessel was similarly allowed through after Ankara negotiated passage directly with Tehran, with 14 more Turkish vessels still awaiting clearance. Think about what that means. Countries that are not at war with Iran, including some aligned with the United States, are quietly negotiating bilateral passage agreements with the country the U.S. is actively bombing. European countries, including Germany, France, and Italy, have also opened direct communication channels with Tehran to request passage. This is Iran's actual strategy working in real time, not necessarily military victory, but political fragmentation. Divide the coalition, make individual deals with individual countries, create a world in which the U.S. is isolated as the aggressor while Iran positions itself as the gatekeeper willing to negotiate. Trump, writing on Truth Social on Saturday, said, "Nations, especially those affected by Iran's attempted closure of the strait, would be sending warships in conjunction with the United States, naming China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the United Kingdom among those he hoped would contribute to and he called it a team effort. Iran's IRGC Navy chief responded almost immediately, mocking the statement and noting that Americans had falsely claimed to destroy Iran's navy, then falsely claimed to be escorting tankers and were now asking others for backup. On Friday morning, Hegseth stood at the Pentagon podium and declared that Iran's leadership was cowering underground. He used a specific word, rats. He claimed Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, was wounded and likely disfigured, citing as evidence only the fact that Khamenei's first official statement had been read by a news anchor rather than delivered in person. No images were released, no intelligence documents, no medical records, just the inference. 1 hour later in Tehran, a massive Quds Day rally was underway. Standing openly in front of tens of thousands of people were President Masoud Pezeshkian and Security Chief Ali Larijani, the same leadership described as rats at the Pentagon podium attending a mass public gathering in broad daylight on camera in front of crowds. Larijani used that rally to deliver Iran's clearest public rejection yet of American diplomatic overtures, dismissing Trump envoy Steve Witkoff's message sent through Oman. Iran's terms for ending the war remain unchanged: full U.S. withdrawal from the region and closure of every American military base in the Middle East. In his first address, delivered by a news anchor on Iranian state TV, Iran's new supreme leader said that the lever of blocking the Strait of Hormuz must definitely be used to heighten economic pressure on the U.S. Iran's IRGC declared that not a liter of oil shall pass through the Strait, vowing to attack any ship linked to the U.S. or Israel. That is the information gap at the heart of Day 15. At the Pentagon, Iran is broken, hiding, desperate. In Tehran, mass rallies, public officials, defiant statements. Between those two realities lies the actual state of the conflict. And into that uncertainty, 2,500 Marines are sailing. The formations deploy aboard amphibious warships and can launch aircraft, landing craft, and small boats to conduct evacuations, maritime security missions, raids, and other limited combat operations. Their possible missions include seizing or neutralizing Iranian-held islands near the strait, establishing positions capable of protecting commercial shipping corridors, or conducting helicopter assault operations against coastal missile infrastructure. Decades of American thought, planning, wargaming, and training have gone into this moment. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz has been a studied scenario for decades, with war games indicating that breaking a Hormuz blockade would take weeks, not days. But amphibious operations carry costs that air campaigns do not. Troops approaching shore are exposed while moving from ships to landing craft, and again while disembarking. Artillery, rockets, missiles, and small arms can target them during that window. History shows that amphibious operations often produce heavy casualties when the defending side is prepared. Iran has had 15 days to prepare. U.S. forces carried out airstrikes on Karg Island in the Persian Gulf on Friday, hitting military sites there. The island is responsible for more than 90% of Iran's oil exports. That strike signals the campaign is now extending beyond military infrastructure toward economic pressure on Iran itself, a significant escalation in targeting philosophy. Washington's strategy is built on a belief that sustained military pressure will eventually degrade Iran's capabilities to the point where the strait can be safely reopened. Tehran's strategy is built on a belief that prolonged economic disruption will force the international community to pressure Washington into reducing its military presence. Both sides believe time works in their favor. Both sides may be wrong. One former U.S. intelligence analyst warned, bringing this war to an end requires recognizing it can still get much, much worse. CENTCOM planners admitted to Congress this week that a full closure of the strait had not been deeply incorporated into early war planning. It was treated as a possibility, not the central scenario. The expectation was a quick campaign. Trump himself had predicted 4 days, perhaps a week. Iran's leadership would lose credibility, domestic unrest would rise, the conflict would resolve itself quickly. It is not resolved. It is day 15. The air campaign continues. The Marines are sailing. The strait remains closed. The U.S. is reinforcing its presence in the region with the USS Tripoli amphibious assault ship and its Marines en route, as Iran says the Strait of Hormuz is closed to tankers and ships of its enemies. 13 Americans have already died in this conflict. The strategic petroleum reserve has been partially depleted. The global shipping system through the world's most critical energy corridor has effectively halted. Allied nations are negotiating side deals with the country being bombed. And the man with ultimate authority over when this ends says it will conclude when he feels it in his bones. On one side, instinct. On the other, a strategy built around geography, economics, and the patience to outlast a superpower's attention span. The next decisive moment in this war will not be determined by a press conference or a Truth Social post. It will be determined in a narrow channel of water, 33 kilometers wide, where geography, logistics, military capability, and global economics are being tested simultaneously, and where 2,500 Marines are now heading to find out whether air power alone was ever going to be enough.